morning, everybody. My name is Josh DeBonis. I am the president and game designer at BumbleBear Games. And we are here with three fine people who represent various aspects of the new arcade scene. So to my right, we have Tiana Tan, who is here to represent the player base. And I'll have you introduce yourself in a second. We have Tomas Vicuna, who is here to represent the designer perspective, and we have Nikita Mikros on the end, who's here to represent the business perspective. Although, also, I mean, all three of us really, do all of those things, or all four of us do all those things as well. And so maybe coming back back this way, you can introduce yourself just briefly.
Sorry, I should go.
Nick, yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
Nick, tell us briefly about you. I mean, we don't have a lot of time, so.
How much time do we have?
We have half an hour. Right?
Oh, okay, that'll be plenty. So I'm Nikita Mikros, and I'm the CEO and a game designer of BumbleBear Games. And as Josh said, we make arcade games.
I'm Tomas Vicuna. I'm the developer and game designer of Black Hamper, and yeah, that's the new arcade game that we are releasing soon, I hope.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm Tiana Tan, and I'm one of the community organizers for the Killer Queen community in New York.
Great, thanks. So, just a quick word about what we're doing with BumbleBear is we're designing new arcade games like Killer Queen, Black Emperor, and Pixel Prison Blues. We're really trying to focus on the social experience, bringing people together. To play our games, you have to go to the arcade. You can't play at home, and that creates a really interesting dynamic among the community. And these friendships and family that has built up around it, I think, are really unique and really interesting to me. And it's been, as designers for us, it's been very inspiring to have that happen. I think it's something new that we're seeing that we've never seen with other games of this kind. So I wanted to ask you, anybody on the panel. We don't all have to answer these questions. So I think it's better if just one or two people answer. You don't have to answer every question. But so I want to start just talking about the community that you see growing around the new arcade. And I mean, this is probably going to focus around Killer Queen, but really any games that you've seen in this. I mean, let me ask you, can you talk about just some experiences you've seen that are very inspiring with the community?
I think that's you, Tiana.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess a few examples are do you remember? So you know Thor from San Francisco. So he's one of the active community members in San Francisco, and basically I think his full-time job is being a courier, sort of. So he relies a lot on his bike to do everything he does. And it was stolen one day, and then the community sort of found out, and immediately they started this sort of GoFundMe online, and then they raised enough money for him to buy a new bike within 2 hours. Basically, we all just donated, and then they got a new bike the next day. So yeah, I don't know. Pretty cool. I don't really see that happening.
Right. So yeah, I mean, so basically, this friendships they extend far outside playing games.
Right.
Yeah. And they do in your life too, right? I mean.
Yeah.
Have you guys? Do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I feel like it's changed my life in a way that, I mean, outside of I'm just going to step aside from my developer role for a second and just say, I know all these people now because of Killer Queen, and because I actually have to go to an arcade to meet them and stuff like that, and in a way that has never really existed for me, developing games for a quarter of a century now. So that's unique. If I was lucky, I'd get an email from some player who really liked my game. But this is a much more intense kind of experience. And I remember Zespy saying to us,
Who's Zespy?
Oh, Zespy is the owner of Logan Arcade, which was the first real arcade that we put Killer Queen into, and he's like, here comes the super fans. You better watch out. And it was like, we really do have super fans, but we have this really amazing relationship with them, and that's been really kind of interesting.
Yeah, I sometimes I feel like I wish I wasn't in the developer role for Killer Queen, because like I kind of want to be part of that community.
You want to hang out.
I want to hang out, and sometimes I feel like, well, I got to kind of do my job right now, you know. And it's like, I mean, it blended very, very much. Like, I don't know where my job begins and my social life ends. You know, it's all kind of together.
Which is kind of dangerous too.
It is dangerous, but it's good and bad. But sometimes I wish that I could just be part of that, like, without it being, you know, without work being part of it. Yeah, because it's such a great community. You know? Okay, so somebody from the audience asked about the design and development of arcade games. How does the process? Maybe let's talk about how does the process differ from other games that you've developed that are not for the arcade, or what have you learned about designing? Maybe Tomas, you want to start with that?
Sure.
Obviously it's my first experience working with an arcade, and I think it's really interesting to see the game as a physical product. I think that's really interesting. Like, I like to see it like as a living kind of design that's just gonna stand there, and when nobody's playing it, it needs to radiate energy to attract people, and it needs to like look cool in order like to make people interested. And it has to like have some sort of mystery to attract people, and it has to be loud when it needs to be loud, and it has to be silent when it needs to be silent. So it's like trying to design like an experience that's kind of circular, which I find like very, very interesting. Like, because when you are playing, for example, a console game, everything is so linear. Like you turn on the machine and then you're done playing and you turn it off. But when you're designing like an arcade game or an arcade cabinet, you're basically designing a product that needs to be alive for an entire week or months or hopefully years, right? So you have to like, what happens when nobody's playing the game? What's gonna be showing when nobody's playing the game? And yeah, like having all those stuff like figure out is like really, really interesting. I come from a filmmaking background, so my creative process is very linear too. So for me, it was very interesting to try to. It's almost like instead of designing like in a one-dimensional space, on a linear space with a beginning and an end, it's kind of you're more designing a 3D object basically, which actually is standing on a space and being alive basically, which I find like really interesting. And especially with what you guys were talking before, like the fact like you can create this object, and if it's successful, that it starts creating followers and it starts creating a community. I think that's fascinating. And yeah,
Great.
Yeah, I mean, even for us, I feel like, you know, we had never made an arcade game before, and we were just, you know, like now we think about attract screens as much as we think about like gameplay in a way, right?
And describe what's the attract screen.
So an attract screen is it's the series of images and videos that appear while no one is playing, right? So arcade machine is sitting there. You, like Tomas said, you want it to attract people. So you really have to think about, well, what is that experience of the person who's passing by the machine? How quickly can you like grab their attention? And how can you hold it long enough that they are like curious enough that they're like, okay, let me see if this is something I'm interested in and possibly put money into, right? And you have about maybe 10 seconds to do that. And if you don't do it well, they'll just walk right past the machine.
And how else do you attract people to the game besides the attract screen?
Are you talking about in the arcade, or are you talking
In the
about
arcade, yeah.
I mean, music, obviously. Yeah, I think music is a big part of it, and it's tough because in a typical arcade, it's pretty loud. There's a lot. There's a lot of lights going on. There's a lot of sound going on, and you don't. You don't necessarily want to be so loud that you drown everything else out, but you don't. But you want to be loud enough that you attract attention to yourself.
Okay, and one of the other questions that came from the audience earlier was, what's in store for Bumble Bash 2? Maybe Nick, can you describe what that is and give us a little pitch, and then I'm going to have Tiana maybe talk about how the community feels about that and what like the community's perspective on Bumble Bash and maybe competition around high level competition around the game. So Nick.
So Bumble Bash is a festival / con that we started last year in Texas, and it includes the Killer Queen National Championship. And last year we had 34 teams. This year we're expecting to have 55 teams. It'll be in Minneapolis, and it's basically a 3-day event where some of the best teams in the country come to compete, and also we have like a lot of other activities that we're planning for the weekend, including some more casual fare parties and other games that we're going to be showing, including Black Emperor. We'll have like a mini tournament of Black Emperor there, and also Pixel Prison Blues, which is another game that we've worked on, which is anywhere between 12 and 30 player game. If you're interested, you can play it. We're going to be running it after this talk in Terminal 5. But yeah, so what else can I say about Bumble Bash?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. But so Tiana, do you want to talk about the player perspective on Bumble Bash and the competitive community around Killer Queen?
Yeah. So like about this time of the year, like about like 2 months before Bumble Bash, everyone starts to sort of form up their teams. So like in different cities, like across the country. And yeah, I don't know. We like to scope out the competition ahead of time, see which teams we have to really look out for, and then we'll get together and just try to beat each other.
Tell us about your team.
Oh, my team's probably like the legacy team of Killer Queen at this point. It's Full Snail University. We're like the oldest team around, I think. We've been together for like over a year, 2 years or something like that. Yeah, everyone hates us because everyone wants us to break up and like form up new teams. But yeah.
Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think they want you to break up and form new teams?
Because we're all so good. They want us in their team.
Maybe after you take home the championship, you can break up.
Damn, savage, Josh. I don't know.
Maybe talk about who are some of the favorites for the championship this year?
So one favorite is the national team that won last year. They're reforming for this year, so that's Teamwork. They also call themselves Twerk. And they're a New York team, so we won the championship last year. So you'll notice on the cabs that they have in Terminal 5, we have like a championship banner on it because that was like the prize that we won last year. And yeah, I don't know.
Any other cities have promising teams that you know?
So I don't know. Honestly, every city is looking really good. There's a lot of new scenes coming, and then they sort of, they're sort of the underdog scenes, but I think they have a lot of potential because they practice like play all the time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That's definitely a big part of it. Right.
And also analyze the competition.
Yeah, like for example, New York, we stream every Friday. We have like we throw like sort of like a casual tournament every Friday between the New York teams, and we have like people tuning in or watching our VODs like all the time to see how we're playing. Mm-hmm. So I think for this Bumble Bash, like add in if I like miss a city, but we have like Chicago, New York, Portland. We have like Des Moines now, Austin, Dallas, Oh my god, I'm missing
Kansas
everything.
City.
Charlotte, Kansas City, Minneapolis, of course, San Francisco,
Seattle.
St. Louis, and they all have teams that are flying out for Bumble Bosch.
Okay, yeah, and so one thing we mentioned before that all the games are very social that we're doing. I think it's very clear that how with Killer Queen it's social because it's multiplayer. But I feel like Black Emperor, even though it's a single player game, is also social in its own way. So do you, I guess Tomas or Nick maybe, do you want to talk about how you see it as being social and maybe compare or contrast it to Killer Queen?
All right. Do you want to take it or?
You too.
I can take
I can take it.
Or
it's fine.
actually, let me
mean,
phrase
the
it this
first-
way.
I mean,
do you think it's social? Actually, let me ask that first.
I think it's social, but on very different terms than Killer Queen. First of
Mhm.
all, because Killer Queen has this thing where everybody shares the token, kind of, in order to play as a group, and Black Emperor doesn't have that. And so Black Emperor is like you. It's basically you and the machine, and you have like a motorcycle and a bunch of like rock and roll. But what's like basically happening around it is, or at least what I've seen, like it's that people who play, like they would play for 5 or 10 minutes, and then they would step on a side and then watch the other person play. And what the game has is, like, since it's the same road every time, you actually benefit from watching other people play, because then you can memorize the game, and then when it's your turn again, you can have the advantage of learning the road. So it starts to generate like this group of people that are actually like the people who are more engaged with the game, and they're basically watching each other play in order to memorize the road and try to get the high score. And you start to get like this crowd that's just keeping an eye on the game, which is pretty cool. So you have like these interesting moments, for example, when somebody would stick with the game like for an hour or something, and then like go to someplace else, and then but from afar he would look like if somebody got like a high score or something. And I know there has been like a couple of times where like people got like high scores, and you can hear people cheering from the other side of the room, which was pretty cool. So those are people like spend like 1 hour or something in the game, and then like move to someplace else, and then so I think like it's a more like implicit or more silent social aspect
It's
of
like
the game.
a quiet. It's a quiet social. I mean, it's a super loud game, right? It's like it's rock and roll. Like that's when you're playing it, you feel like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm so cool. I'm whatever. But the interaction between the players, like I've experienced this with the janitor at NYU because he plays a lot.
Right.
He's so good.
And yeah, he's really good. And sometimes like if I'm close to him on the leaderboard, like we're just kind of looking at each other, like yeah, and that's an interesting, like we have a relationship now because of Black Emperor, which I think is interesting. It's not the same as Killer Queen where everybody's like working super hard, super intensely at the same time. It's more of a very quiet competition.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so one more question, I guess, for everybody. At this event, Play NYC, we are doing something this experimental for us that I've never really seen at a con like this, which is we're selling tokens to play our games. Our games are not on free play. And I mean, people kind of when we initially told them about this, were kind of shocked. And I mean, I think it's a bold move. So can you guys talk a little bit about how that's going and how people are reacting to it and just what you've observed?
Sure. So when we were setting up on Friday, one of the developers came up to me and was like, "Wait, it's not going to be on free play? That's super ballsy." And I was like, "Yeah, might be a catastrophe." But it was a little scary, like the first half hour that we were doing it. but people just got into the rhythm of it, and we're pretty generous with the tokens too. And once people started putting tokens to the machine and they got used to that idea, then it was really not a problem at all. I mean, the machines were packed all day yesterday. So I think it's an interesting model for arcade games. I don't think it would work if I had set up a PS4 and said, "Hey, pay me a token to play this game." But they're like, if you can create the right context, then it kind of makes sense. So, and we've worked kind of hard to create that context, you know.
Yeah, and do you guys feel the same? Do you have anything to add? Maybe
Yeah, I think for Black Emperor it's interesting because this is the first time where we are seeing actually people putting money to play it, like on free play. So this is a game where you can die like in 50 seconds, right? And it has like a really cool death screen, which is part of one of the things that I really put some effort in it. Like you feel really cool when dying. So since it's a super fast game loop, and then when you die, you get all this feedback, like right? And but it's kind of so on free play works great because it's like, oh my god, it's so cool, I died, right? But when you're actually playing, it's like, oh, it's so cool, I died, I lost money, right? So I was kind of curious that. So I think it's been fun, like to see how people are reacting with one token, one life, which I think that move is actually kind of ballsy because one life is actually like 20 seconds of play or something. If you're good, like it's 45 seconds of
But
play.
it's a super satisfying 45 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we still need to experiment if one token is one play, or maybe like the token needs to be because right now it's 25 cents, which is pretty cheap, but maybe like the act of putting a token symbolically just maybe it feels already. I don't know. I think we still need to like, iterate a little bit, but it's definitely like from my perspective been interesting to see people interact for the first time with tokens.
And Tiana, how did it feel as a player? Like, I mean, normally you play at NYU where it's on free play, or at Reclamation Law, right?
Yeah.
It's also on free play. So, did it feel different for you having to pay?
Honestly,
You were playing it.
I mooched all my games yesterday.
Yeah.
I just let other people put in tokens. I just played.
Yeah, actually, so that's a really interesting thing you bring up is mooching culture around
Yeah.
Killer Queen. 'Cause
There are a lot of
you can
moochers.
do it, right?
Yeah.
So talk about is that something you've observed with other bars that you charge?
I don't
Or
know.
the
Actually, the other scenes they're honestly so generous, and I think it's because whenever I fly out to other cities to play, I'm the visitor, and like everyone's always super kind to the visitors coming out to play. But they'll always they're like, oh, Tiana, like you're here to play. It's like here's like a couple of like tokens, or here's a couple of quarters. Like just take it and like do whatever you want. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. You know? So.
Yeah. Well, and Nick, do you want to speak about
Yeah.
From our perspective?
I mean,
about
from my
moochers?
perspective, I think that the moochers are good. Like,
Why?
because they're usually the best player. And so, and so everybody's bringing something to the table, right? Like, the moochers are bringing like their skills, and the people with the money are bringing the money. So,
Yeah.
like, I think it's all right, you know. Honestly,
Can you
Sponsor
describe
player.
how, like, or Tiana, I guess, how is mooching possible in Killer Queen? Like, what's the
So, I don't know if people like know Killer Queen, but it's like a 10-player game. So, in order to get the most satisfying play out of it, you have all 10 people on the cabinet. So, in order to do so, sometimes, you know, if people aren't around, you just gotta grab people who are like all around you to like drag them to play with you, like from the bar and stuff. So.
right? Sometimes it's just a matter of filling bodies.
Filling in space.
Yeah.
And basically you pay a certain amount to unlock the whole machine.
Right.
So Nick, why isn't it?
So yeah, so I mean, we had originally talked about like, well, what if we make it like a quarter per person, right? And so that like everybody has to like put money into the machine, and in a way that would be more fair, right? But what we realized was that that was going to impede uh, people just gathering people from the bar or whatever and just bringing them into the game. We knew the best way to play the game was with all 10 players. So it seemed silly for us to say, like, okay, well, everybody's got to put their own coin in, because then they're just going to play subpar games. And so that wasn't going to be a good experience. It just didn't make much sense to us. We got a lot of pushback from arcade operators and more like old school arcade people about that. They thought that, I don't know, we're communists or something, which maybe we are. I don't know, but it has worked out really well, I think, for the game.
Okay, so I guess at this point I'd like to open up questions from the audience. Do we have a question?
We sell them.
And how does that talk about how that process works?
So, well, there's a couple of ways that it can work. I mean, now you can actually just buy a machine directly off of our website.
How much is it?
It is 12,900, 12,500, 12,000. Oh, okay, it's 12,000.
Dang, 13,000.
I don't know.
It's
It's a lot of money.
12,995. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can buy it directly off the website.
For Killer Queen.
For Killer Queen.
And
What? Yeah, it's one unit. Like it's both. It's two cabinets, but we consider it one unit. So you can just buy it with a credit card, and it will come eventually. It will come eventually. But most people deal with our sales guy, Brian, and he, because they want to send a check instead of paying with credit card and stuff. But basically, the process is you put an order, we contact you, we get all your shipping information, and then we build the cabinet, and we send it to you, and then you put it in your barcade and start making money on it.
I will say, one question that I always get is, why haven't you put a machine in St. Louis or whatever city? As if, I mean,
Oh, right. People think we own them.
well, yeah, I mean, people think like we have the ability to just like stick a machine in the bar, which like, I mean, it's not. I'm not surprised that we have that, but the reality is like, well, the bar has to buy it from us or have some kind of relationship with us. It's up to them to put it, it's their venue, and that's challenging. I mean, it does work really well in a lot of bars. It makes them a lot of money, but it's a big risk for them to take, both the initial outlay of the money, but then also the floor space is so valuable, especially in urban areas where the game works best. And the game's it's just weird. Like they are often scared about scaring off people because of weirdness.
But I have to say that is starting. We're starting to kind of like break them down a little bit, right? Like as the game gets more popular, as our notoriety grows, now you're seeing like some of the kind of older arcade owners starting to warm up to the game and saying, "Oh yeah, I'd like it." Now it becomes a matter of price. Like, I want it cheaper or whatever. But at least they want it. Before, in the beginning, we're just basically begging them to take it.
Okay, another question. Yeah. real quick, I think the guest you're talking about was probably Eugene Jarvis, right? Yeah. So and he's well, I think I saw it.
I
Yeah.
posted it, yeah.
Oh, you did. Yeah. And yeah, Eugene Jarvis, he's the designer of
Fender, Robotron,
Cruisin', a lot
Smash
of
TV.
great classic. Well, okay, so Nick, how does it feel?
I mean, it feels awesome, honestly. Eugene is kind of a little bit of a hero of ours. He was making really amazing arcade games back when there was nothing. But I mean, to your point, I feel like we've been very strategic also about where certain cabinets go because we know that influential players will be going to those places. Like, we really wanted a machine in San Francisco. We wanted something in the Bay Area because we knew that, like, I mean, we definitely want something in LA now, right? Like, and we're trying very hard to make that happen because the more exposure that we get to certain kinds of game celebrities, the better it is for us. So there's that part of it. As far as like this new wave of arcade mania or whatever it is, I mean, I have a lot of theories about that. I feel like I grew up playing games in arcades. That was my first gaming experience. I didn't have a home console. I had to go out and so I'd go to Times Square, I'd go to Playland, I'd go to 34th Street and Chinatown Fair. And for me, like, that was how you played video games. And as I got older and I became a developer and the arcades faded away and there was not really a lot of good places to play anymore, I started developing games for home. So, which I think a lot of my earlier attempts at making games should have really been arcade games. Like, they failed as home games. So for me, like, making an arcade game was kind of like, oh, I've been waiting 25 years to do this. So it's really kind of old for me, not new, but in a way it is new because this is a totally different community than the community that I was playing arcade games with when I was a teen. Like, it's a much more nice group. Not everybody's, yeah. Let's just say that they're a much nicer group, and they are much more games literate. Like, we didn't know anything, right? We like, Pong had come out 3 years before or whatever. It was like, not now. The players that are playing these arcade games have been playing video games since they were 5, and it's a totally different universe that this new arcade scene is emerging from. And I really enjoy that it's not a retro thing. It's not like, we're not trying to be like the 50-in-1 name cabinet or whatever.
And so, Tiana, can you tell us how it feels to be one of the Vanguards of the player bases in this case?
I don't know, it's pretty interesting. So like, I was playing Killer Queen back when it was basically only on Xavier, and now there's like multiple cities that have like established across the country. It's just like kind of crazy to see. So yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see like where Killer Queen goes. I know like we try to sort of form a Killer Queen league because we noticed that the national scene was growing, but then we met a lot of resistance because a lot of Killer Queen is really grassroots. A lot of people who started their scene just because it was like one person was really into Killer Queen and they dragged a bunch of people to play with them, started this scene, and those are the most successful scenes we have across the country. Like, a lot of cities have Killer Queen with no scene. They're just like dead cities and no places have it. But it's interesting because a lot of people who got interested in Killer Queen, people went to like California Extreme and then they noticed the game there, like MagFest, stuff like that. And they went off to their own cities, or like they moved from cities like Chicago that already had established scenes, and then started scenes in the cities they moved to. So it's interesting to see, and that's why a lot of people resisted sort of forming a Killer Queen League because they wanted to keep it really grassroots. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting balance between like the super competitive players and the more casual players because like you can only really play on a set of cabinets, right? So if a more casual group of people want to go on and play, and then the really like tryhards want to play, it's like you end up with this sort of like clash of players. So I don't know. I'm interested to see where it ends up, and yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
So, are we out of time? Or one more question? Okay, so we're out of time. Just real quick, Tiana, can you just give a quick plug to where people can play Killer Queen in New York?
Yeah. So in New York right now, you can come play with us on like Wednesday. No, I guess Tuesday nights now. Friday nights at NYC Game Center, which is in Brooklyn in Metro Tech. Or you can come to Reclamation Bar in like East York.
And where can you play Black Emperor?
It's going to be at 2 bits in the Lower East Side.
Great, and also you can play all the games over in Terminal 5 today, just inside the main. So thank you all so much. Thanks to Tiana and Tomas and Nick, and we'll see you all afterwards. We'll be outside if you have any other questions. Feel free to hit us up. And thanks so much. Have a good day.